What if the clarity you've been searching for isn't something you find out there, but something that's been quietly trying to get your attention from within? Because in a world full of noise, rules, and expectations about who you should be, what happens when you stop following someone else's path and start listening to your own? Enjoy the show. Welcome to Make It a Great One with Dr. Dan. This show is all about bringing hope, connection, awareness, and wisdom through meaningful conversations that inspire us to be better versions of ourselves and have a positive impact on humanity. This is your space to pause, reflect, and reconnect with who you are, what you care about, and who you want to be. We have this moment, this day, and this life. Let's make it a great one. Today, I'm speaking with Faith Freed. Faith is a licensed psychotherapist who brings more than 15 years of clinical experience and 2 advanced degrees to her private practice, writing, and business. She specializes in personal and spiritual growth, helping people find clarity, confidence, and connection. Faith's previous books include Is Your Authentic Spirituality Unleashed and Starting Therapy, A Guide to Getting Ready, Feeling Informed, and Gaining the Most from Your Sessions. Her new book is DIY Spirituality, Chart Your Own Sacred Path. Faith is the founder of Freedom, a company dedicated to inspiration, DIY spirituality, and authentic self-expression. Faith, welcome to the show.
Hi, Dr. Dan. Thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this.
Freedom. I love that. So everyone who can't, I'm saying it, you have to see how it's spelled. Freedom is F-R-E-E-D. That is Faith's last name. And then dash O-M. I think a nod to some of the spiritual practices, I'm guessing.
Well, and even more so about freedom, right? Freedom and then freedom. So they go together.
They do go together. So I know we have a somewhat a blended path or a similar path finding psychology and graduate school. And I understand that as you were transitioning from business and being the person that makes people laugh and all the marketing and all that pressure, you found your way to a psychology program that emphasized spirituality. And it sounded like that wasn't necessarily something you specifically sought.
Yeah, it's funny. I think it's beautiful how the journey unfolds in ways that we never could have foreseen. I was a very devoted copywriter, and I mean that in the sense that I took my job to be creative seriously, and ironically, I had to be funny as well. And that was always like with a gun to my head, sort of, you know what I mean? Like heads are going to roll if these headlines aren't ready, make it funnier. And it was a really anxiety producing career, though I loved it. And there were a lot of really, I guess, diagnosable people that I worked with, because I think creatives kind of get a pass. And, if they're talented enough, they can behave in all sorts of crazy ways. So, and then there was the psychological component of the account people wanting to know the psychology of our customers so that we could persuade them to buy. And then there was the psychology of the people that I was working with who would come to me in my little cubicle for advice on relationships and such. And I loved doing that. And I think I loved that more than the writing. But really what ended up changing me up with in terms of what I wanted was that I became a mom. And I know it's cliche and I hate that part of it, but I kind of knew that there was more to life. And I also didn't want to be so stressed as a mom. I didn't want to bring that anxiety home with me. So then I just slowly but surely started to go to the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology. And it was such a shift in, it was like I felt very at home. And the way that they wove spirituality with psychology was like my sweet spot. And so that's been my favorite lane ever since.
A lot of Carl Jung, I imagined, who masterfully brought spirituality into the field of psychology so many years ago, right? And I mean, in such an amazing way. And but I want to say, I want to go back to something you said and push back on the cliche because that is really important. That so many people, when they have a major life event, and often children is one of them, that helping us see that wait, there's more. And maybe the things that I thought were important are less important. And what a wonderful opportunity to have that perspective, because we also know that a lot of us only find that perspective when we get sort of sidelined or just completely stressed and burned out, and then we have to look at other ways. And it sounded like you were ahead of it.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I would give myself that kind of credit. I didn't see it coming whatsoever. And it was really chemical, if you know what I mean.
Mm.
It was physiological. Um, and so powerful. You know, you can only do so much with your mind. And my mind was saying, go back to work because, you know, this is something that I worked very hard to attain and I was at a certain level. Um, I loved my work, etc. But so that's what my brain would have had me do. But, you know, as soon as my son was born and I saw him and felt him and, I just had a cataclysmic shift and I paid attention to that. And I think, Dan, maybe that's what people need to do, whether it is based on positive, negative, call it what you will, even just mysterious kind of information from the body. Um, and it could be a regular day or it could be something that was prompted by a big moment. But I think paying attention to that and reevaluating is very important.
Very important. And this is actually this is this is what we're talking about with spirituality and the stirrings of the soul, perhaps, right? That's something like listening, because we get messages a lot, but there's a lot of noise. So it's often hard in our programming. It's often hard for us to hear what those messages are. And they're often inconvenient and they're often uncomfortable because it means that we maybe need to do something differently or very differently. As I talk about, say, spirituality, I'm interested in, for our listeners, you know, spirituality is a word that's used a lot and more these days, which I think is a good thing. What does that mean for you? Right? There's so many different ways of looking at spirituality. So how do you formulate, conceptualize what spirituality is?
You know what? I like to keep things simple. If you looked at my book, you know that. I mean, it looks like it's written for a kindergartner because it has illustrations on every single spread and not very much copy. So I'm going to tell you how I think about spirituality. It's a connection with yourself and with your source. I mean, a true connection, a deep connection, a deep knowing. And that's it. A
Mm.
connection with your true self and your source as you conceive of it.
True self and true source. So let's keep digging. So how would you define what one's true self is?
Well, I think that's the divine spark within. And it could be called many things: higher self, spark. It could be called Atman, but depending on sort of where you're coming from, it is that piece of you that is, well, you could call it your soul or your spirit, that is, you know, sort of timeless and transcends the body and this earth experience. Maybe there is wisdom from the ages, and that, to me, that's more about the soul. And then that
Hmm.
spirit is that part of you that just soars, that's connected to the stars and the universe. And so I think that we can find it in different ways. It's a tough thing to point to because it's not physical. But do you know that you have that aspect of you?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And that's been a process, my own, going through my own process of growth and of meditation and of journaling and of personal work. And I find that It's having the quiet, the courage, the persistence, the perseverance to keep peeling away all of the things that we have become or told we were or roles we stepped into, externally driven motivations, and going inward to really see like what is in there, what is true for me, when am I in flow, when am I at peace, what is my truth, right?
Exactly. And I think it really is your inner compass. That example we dug into a little bit about changing careers when my son was born. That was like a soul directive. And so it is getting quiet and tuning in and finding your essence again.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
those really fundamental, who am I? What is my purpose? Those big questions, I think, are best answered by your soul.
And I think this is also where we connect it to source and your true source and how these things, so how do these things go together? I mean, can one be connected to one's higher self, one's truest self, without being connected to some higher source or other source?
I think so. That's the DIY in the book's title, do it yourself. There are so many different ways to conceive of the divine and your spiritual life. And at the end of the day, what resonates is really what to lean into. And so, for a lot of people, there isn't an external source of spirituality. And so, the soul and spirit would be then probably the the divine go-to, and that could very well be enough,
Hmm.
in my humble opinion. I don't
Yes.
think we have to have a definition.
For divine, what do you see, just to make that real for people listening? What constitutes divine? Or, we hear the word divinity a lot. I just think a lot of these words, we don't really think about what they mean a lot of the time. So help us understand, what is divine?
Yeah.
And
Well, so it is this ineffable presence. If we take it to Star Wars, it's the Force.
thank you for saying that. Oh, I'm always the one that has to bring that up. And
Oh,
you brought that up. I love that. Yes, it's the force. It
I'm your
binds
sister.
us.
I'm your
It,
sister. And I think that actually a lot of these epic sagas that we love have that element where the universe is playing along and we co-create our existence. So if you're able to surrender, sort of an outcome, let's say, what are you surrendering that to? And you can conceive of that however you want, but it's that sense that you're not alone, you're connected to everything.
Mhm.
And it's that field. So I call it infinite source. Um, some people call it God. I tend to think that um, anthropomorphizes things, and it kind of takes it to the masculine. You could call it God Goddess. You could call it, what would you call it? What do you
I
call it?
I call it the universe, actually. I think that's
Yeah.
the one that the one I most commonly go to is, I am turning this over to the universe, or the universe is giving me a message, or um, um, universe, I'm open. Like, I'm open to some messages here. Uh, so that word works for me most of the time.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. And when you say universe, I just think about a starry sky,
Hmm.
and the moon. And gosh, I mean, there's so much that we can't explain. And those mysteries are where the divine is, it's the divine domain.
Hmm.
Even Einstein admitted there were things that we cannot know, and that he had some faith based on those mysteries. So I think we can all be humble enough to say, yeah, I mean, makes sense. I mean, who knows? At least who knows? It's possible.
Who knows? Yeah, who knows? So I was looking at some of the notes that I took and some of the language that you use, and I realized, there's all the and listening to you too, listening to there's all these words that, I heard you say recently on a different podcast, and I was surprised about you were talking about the percentage of people who consider themselves religious versus not religious. And I remember there was one, it was 1/3, but I couldn't remember. Is it 1/3 of people still consider themselves religious, or did I get that wrong? Is it spirituality?
Spiritual, but not religious.
Spirit. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Spiritual, but not religious. Okay. So the point I am attempting to make is so many of these words, I think, have triggers for people who were raised in religion, and maybe didn't adopt it or didn't agree with it. And so what happens is then the words, and this is partially my experience too, is the words get put in a box of, like, in your title, sacred. You mentioned source, divinity, and they become initial triggers for people. And I think this is an opportunity for us to demystify how these words live and operate outside of religion for those who do have that seeking and do have that pull to the something greater, to the unknown and to the mystery, but don't want to betray themselves because of decisions they've made about religion.
Absolutely. You're right. It is, the whole divine aspect of life, of self and source, is beyond words. And so it's very clumsy to have to put words to it. And one word is going to offend one person, and another's going to offend another and turn off another. And that's why I'm inviting people in the book to put their own words to it. Um, I call Infinite Source is for short, and that's just my nickname. And I really don't think that is mine's what it's called. And at the same time, we're stuck with language. I mean, that's all we have. Unless you know sign language, that might be an out, but I don't. And, so that's the way we communicate. And those are the shackles that we operate with. And so if we have to use English, then how do we do that in a way that isn't going to turn people off? You know what? I don't know. I think that we're doing our best right now, and this is about as good as it gets.
Hmm.
Unless you just say no words, no words.
Right. Well, and ineffable, which is used a lot in the field of spirituality, actually, and religion, is this there aren't words, right? It's a fancy name for
Right.
beyond words, and
Exactly.
so much of faith, your name, so much of what about the coincidence or non-coincidence there? Your name is Faith. So much of the faith that goes with both religion and with spirituality is, it doesn't have words. It doesn't have necessarily cause and effect. It isn't data driven, right? It isn't objective. It's abstract. And I just find it fascinating how we humans find ways to believe some things but not other things, and want proof for some things but not other things, and how hard it is to
Yeah.
truly trust and to truly have faith, and, as you said, surrender. It's like, surrender to what? What do you mean? Like, I'm supposed to stop trying? I'm just supposed to, like, let things unfold? And for those of us who've lived long enough and tried to practice this, man, does it feel at times way better to let something unfold than to try to control and force and direct something that we really don't have any control over in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because words only go so far. I would have liked that being called Faith really often just automatically bestowed faith upon me, and I had faith all the time. But the truth is, it's a verb.
Hmm.
And I actually have to do that. So, not to suggest that there is effort in having faith, because it probably is more close to letting go, but there is a bit of effort in terms of just orienting yourself to that worldview. You know, you have to bring yourself back, right? To like so when you have a bad day, so called, right? It's the thing that happened, the fender bender. You don't see the meaning in that right now. Hindsight's 2020. Maybe someday it will make sense. Maybe it won't. But if you remember, okay, I can have faith that the universe has something in mind for me,
Hmm.
and I'm playing a role here. You know, maybe it's really not about you in that moment. Maybe it is about the person that you collided with. But in any case, yeah, the I call it intention surrender. And the beautiful thing about, you know, being this age and having written two other books is that I could take my life experience and then tweak things. And I introduced the idea of intention surrender a long time ago with my first book in 2013. And you know, it's not a new idea. It's basically, know where you're going, and then, you know, surrender the outcome. But I think that where people get hung up is that, you know, there is reality also. So between, I think conceive, believe, achieve is missing a step. It's really conceive, believe, work your ass off, right? And achieve. And so we have to do things.
Hmm.
And so the law of attraction stuff, I think, is missing the underscoring of you have to take so many steps for the universe to hold your hand and partner through it with you.
Yes. Yes. And it makes me think of so yes, work your ass off, and then where you went to is the steps, and some people call it inspired action, other people call it aligned action, and it's this idea that you we need we're really talking about being in partnership with the universe now, which I love. The idea that, and for some people that's just it's overwhelming to think about the idea that there's something greater forces out there that we can't see and we can't control. But I see it more like the comment that Stephen Hawking made about when people said, isn't it scary to think there are other people, other species out there, life forms out there? And he's like, it's scarier to think that there aren't. So,
Right.
this whole idea that we are not alone, there are other forces that are working for us, with us. And going back to your point, I like faith as a verb, because you're absolutely right. It's having to actively get ourselves back into that space or that frame when we pop out of it, as we normally do. I mean, just like meditation, the whole point of meditation is realizing when your mind is wandering, so you center yourself back. And I find it very similar with the whole idea of actively trying to be in faith or in trust, because it's so easy to get pushed right off that log.
Yes. Yes. And it's a nice reminder, I think, that you don't have to do it all. You don't have to white knuckle it. I think of life as a co-creation. And so I do have to do my part, but then the universe shows up. So and you know, I don't know, there's something you said about I'm hearing you like I'm wondering if you feel like you have to convince people, or is it enough just for you to believe it? You know, like some people aren't going to they're not going to adopt spirituality as part of their life's journey. Um but for the people who can make space for the spiritual life, I would suggest just keeping track of the miracles, because, you know, I do that every day. And I consider miracles to be very tiny or very huge. So I can always count 10 or 11. You know, depending on your definition of miracle. I mean, you know, a good parking space can be a miracle, if you know what I mean, if you're running late. And so yeah, when things work out, I think, and you notice and you kind of say, huh, like a random encounter, sometimes the things that line up for you that are impossibly complex, right? And that really are beyond reason. I think, you got to chalk it up to the universe. At least I do. But
Hmm.
if people say, that's just a coincidence, that's okay. Some people are very earth bound, and I don't judge that.
Yeah, so there's coincidence or there's synchronicity, how we look at it. And of course, Jung brought the concept of synchronicity, and how I've heard the difference described. And there might not be a difference, but when there are differences, people saying, what's the difference between a coincidence or a synchronicity? One way I've heard it described is the synchronicities feel different than a coincidence. Now, I'm not saying a coincidence might not be a little miracle like you've talked about, like, whoa, I did not think that that would happen right now. Like, that is a miracle. But there are some things that you just can't ignore as coincidences, or these repeated things that keep happening that are more than coincidences. And to your point, maybe I am pushing because I like, my goal is to continue to help people expand and grow in ways that just, propel them forward. So like, I have that desire, and it's up to everyone, to approach these things the way, whatever, however it is aligned or not aligned with them. My experience has been, when we do see things more from the lens of a synchronous moment or some message, or as you say, a miracle than a coincidence, life just feels more rich and exciting and mysterious in a wonderful way.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's right. How do you want to feel? I think it's really exciting, to think that maybe the universe is actually conspiring in your favor and you're not alone, right? And
Mhm,
there are forces that are working on your behalf behind the scenes. Then you don't feel alone. You
mhm,
know that wonderful things are around the corner. You know that you can enlist help if you need it. So I
mhm,
think it definitely brings a lot more vitality, and intrigue and excitement into life. To believe that there is such a thing as the divine.
mhm. And it is how we think about things. I'm thinking of two things right now. One is the late great Wayne Dyer, one of his many famous sayings: "When we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change."
Yeah,
And I'm also
maybe.
thinking of something the Holiness Dalai Lama has said, which is, when he thinks about himself as being the only Dalai Lama among 8 billion people, he feels very alone. When he thinks of himself as being one of 8 billion people, he feels connected. And it's like, to your point, like, how do we look at, like, we can choose how we look at things in life. Are we
Yeah.
focused on the things that are going wrong? Are we focused on the things that happen to go right? Yeah, and they're different lenses. And to be fair, we all have moods and emotions and good days and bad days. I think this is back to what you were talking about with, like, faith as a verb. It's like, how do we get ourselves back to a mindset that serves us, and opens us up as to one that might limit our possibilities and our feelings.
Yes. Well, you're right. A lot of it has to do with mindset. I think if we start there, then we can move towards the body and the soul and the spirit and the divine. But if we just start with the physical body and the brain, the brain, that'll be number one. And there does need to be some intervention that happens internally there. The brain is, as you know, it's problem focused. So the brain will automatically go to the negative. What is wrong? This is survival, but
Hmm.
it's not necessarily serving us just when we're going about our normal day. So knowing that, as soon as everything's pretty chill and everything's all right, your brain is going to cook something up for you to worry about. If you know that, then you can pivot and rest in the okayness of now, and the, accepting of the moment, get into presence, and then make space for the possibilities and the beautiful things that can happen. You can also use gratitude as a way to shift, okay, so you had the fender bender, what are 10 things that actually went right this week? You know what I mean? So gratitude helps, but I do think that it's got to be intentional.
That's the key, right? To be intentional. I think at some point, maybe they're like, we get, maybe this is the enlightened, the enlightened way where I do believe we get to a place, the more and more we practice anything and practice thinking a certain way, like diligently, it starts to be more of our default way, as opposed to the forced way or the intentional way. That's the goal, but absolutely being intentional about, I want to look at this way instead of that way. That's a choice. And we
Yeah.
also know that there is way more positive, magical, and as you say, miracle stuff going on when we are looking for it versus when we aren't.
100%. Yep. Yeah. Um, it's, it's things like, this joke doesn't usually work, but you know how people would talk about manifestation?
Hmm.
Well, I said to the universe, I can only have a dog if it is, and it was like 10 things, right? Like it's got to be a creature of great inspiration and beauty, and on and on and on, right? And it has to have a very mellow temperament, etc. And I got the perfect dog. She's a blue Great Dane. Her name is Venus. And I like to say that I she's my dogifestation because
I haven't heard that
she
before. Yeah.
she you have.
I have not heard that
Oh,
before. No,
okay,
the
okay. Well,
conversation.
I mean, but so like I need look no farther than the dog that came into my life, who is like, I believe, the absolute perfect creature best friend for me. This particular dog that would have been different if other people in my family hadn't waited and said, "Oh, she should have a little American with the European and make sure it doesn't slobber." And I'm sorry it wasn't a rescue because that didn't work out, but I did try. So anyway, the point is, like a lot of times when I have to collaborate with other people, choosing our home, we made it like a vote, and it wasn't my first choice. And now I am so grateful that it turned out to be the home that I have. So, and the dog that we have is because of everyone's input. And I feel like these are miracles. They are co-creations, right? I mean, I said what I said, and then there's collaboration and an open mind, and modifications and such. But then what is delivered by the universe, I could see in hindsight whether it's what I intended or not. Specifically, bam, could not have been more right.
Mm.
So that would be a way to kind of look at life, right? Like, can you think of an example in your life where the outcome that the universe served up for you was better than what you had in mind?
Hmm. Hmm. And okay, so this makes me think about back to synchronicity and great books of the past. And one of the great books of the past, Celestine Prophecy, it was really about being open and aware to what those coincidences might be, and then being more than coincidences because, oh, you see someone that looks familiar, you make eye contact with them, and then you can choose to say hello or you can just walk past. Like there's something familiar, but you're not sure. And many times, for example, and in the book, it's like those connections were meaningful connections that led to something if you took the time to stop. Or something, you see something that looks interesting to you, and you pause for a second, and then you decide, no, I'm just going to keep going, as opposed to going into that storefront, for example. And so these are the things that, as we talk now, and I feel like we're in this cone of this, I don't know, this place that we're in together. It's so, things become so clear. And I
Yeah.
want to acknowledge, like, when we're in everyday life, it does take the effort and the training to be open, to pause, to stop when something grabs us, to give it a moment, to give it a second, than just to keep going and doing our regular daily thing.
Yeah. I love that book, The Celestine Prophecy. And I agree with you. I think that you can employ your intuition. So rather than thinking about it, which, can just lead to analysis paralysis, do I
Mhm.
go in? Do I not? Is this a sign? Is this just me taking a detour? I think, you're not going to get the answer that way. It's more like, is there something pulling you?
Mhm.
And just let it be that simple
Mhm.
and check it out. And it might not 100% of the time be something that turns out to be like, well, of course I had to go in there because I got the book that changed my life. And I wasn't even going to a bookstore, but they had books, right? Like, I mean, um, as far as the people thing goes, yeah, I've analyzed that one with my mind. And I agree with you. I think that that those connections can be very important and worth exploring. The one downfall I'd say of DIY spirituality is that it doesn't offer community like like some traditions do. And
Mhm.
I think the antidote is that you can think humanity is your community. So
Mhm.
if you are out there on the sidewalk and you're passing someone and it feels meaningful and meant, and you can be open hearted and curious, it's worth exploring.
So, okay, this we I think we just had a little bit of uh, a I've experienced a, first I was going to say coincidence, but maybe a synchronicity, because as you were talking about maybe the lack of community focus built into DIY spirituality framework, I was thinking about moving into nature, and how nature, which is in your book as a key access point in the disco ball, is spiritual for many. The act of just being in nature and the awe of being in nature. And then, so when you said that, I was literally thinking, there's so a community of people who love nature,
Yeah.
people who go, on hikes together, people go on camping trips together, people who look at the wildflowers together. And so maybe it is about, I do want to talk about nature and hear what you have to say about nature, and the idea of finding community through your own version of spirituality.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that also is, I feel, very do it yourself, in the sense of some people are really socially minded. Some people, they like to go run a race with a bunch of other runners. And other people want to do it solitary. And I think that I don't know, getting your community is up to you in terms of, do you want to go into your communion with nature with other people? And that could really elevate the experience. And then it could also be amazing to take like a solo pilgrimage and spend some time alone in nature. So that is really particular, I think, to the person. That's why DIY makes sense to me. Because
Hmm.
some people are, going back to Jung, extroverted or introverted, right? And we all need a social framework of some kind. But is it part of your spiritual life or not? That is totally up to you, in my view.
Well, and this is it's freeing and refreshing the idea of you make it up yourself because it's what matters to you. And I also imagine for some, it's a little bit more anxiety provoking because a lot of people like to be told what to do. And if they do it a certain way, then good things are going to happen. Right. So this is this whole choose your own spirituality adventure.
Well, that's why the disco ball is in the book. It offers
And
those
behind you, it's on the cover right there behind you.
right there behind
Yes.
me. Of
Yes.
course. It's what we
Yes.
do. That's how we do it.
Yep.
Um, but those four quadrants are so simple, and it offers a model of it shows what I do, my DIY. So if you don't want to invent something from scratch, it's like, okay, or for your consideration, maybe you could, give this a spin, and it's simply, body, mind, soul, spirit, the divine or source, and the divine embodied or nature, and that's it. So if you sort of hit those bases, um, if you look into those aspects of your life, you might get some hints and clues as to, well, oh, what do I do in that quadrant? Like, what works for me there? How am I nurturing this part of my life? And it's so it doesn't have to be so daunting, and it shouldn't be.
Hmm.
I mean, that's no fun. It doesn't have to be so heady and so rules
Yes.
based. And as
Yeah.
a matter of fact, it could change from one day to the next.
Well, and that's what's so interesting about my understanding of intuition and a lot of different aspects of spirituality. It's getting out of our head and into our heart, and we spend like so much time. You said analysis paralysis earlier. Like we so much time in our heads, and the connecting with something greater, whatever that is not in our head.
Right. I agree with you. Yeah.
I liked how you but the beginning of the book basically is this whole idea of disco ball that you came up with for a few different reasons, and one of them is that life is a party to be celebrated, right? Like our existence is a party to be celebrated, and I just thought that that was also a very nice framing of this idea of this opportunity we have, and to be fair with all of the suffering that is happening close and far away.
Yeah.
I know that comes up a lot when we talk about the magical opportunity of life, but it's like everything, right? It's being in this human form. It's all of it, right? There are many big miracles, little miracles, and there's also tragedy and really difficult circumstances and feelings. And so I want to throw all that in there. And at the same time, this is why I believe a reason of thinking about spirituality. And for those that are also religious and or like it's something more to look towards as we are navigating this life that we are find ourselves in.
Yeah. Well, remember, I'm a psychotherapist, so I would say that the challenges that we face and the struggles and, so much of the doom and gloom that's very real, I think is the problem. And then sort of I'm serving up DIY spirituality as a proposed solution in a way. So if you just look at the solution and not the problem, it might seem like we are bypassing.
Mhm.
But that's not the intention. The intention is that you have a portable toolbox that exists within you that you take everywhere you go. And so if you do feel depleted and depressed and overwhelmed by what's going on in the world, then you can use your spirituality to help you get through it.
Mhm. Well said. Right. I like that as the solution, um, and something to go back to or to lean on or to seek. I know for me, I mean, just getting out into nature changes how I feel about things and how I think about things. Even when circumstances are not any different when I return, um,
Right.
it is an experience. It is a different experience. And I think I think another point worth us talking about is the different types of spiritual practices and ideas that you have in your book also pull us away from all of the kind of the moment to moment technology and news and feeds and noise,
Hmm.
because we have to get away from that stuff to be able to connect with something else, even if that something else is ourself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really true. It's funny if I could bridge from technology to nature, I would admit that I use YouTube sometimes for soothing meditation of a certain frequency. And I use the Insight Timer app, and I'm a teacher there, and I do meditations. Sometimes that's how I fall asleep, right? And I use an app to time my meditation, although I really don't like doing that. I need to get an old fashioned timer, honestly. Um, but I also don't like to use my phone as my clock. I don't take it everywhere I go. Um, so I think that we do have to lift the head from the screen and get out the door. It's essential. And yeah, I think that goes for people of all ages, not just Gen Z and not just, the kids. It's all of us. We need to do that more. And
Mhm.
it shouldn't feel weird. I mean, it should be habitual and pleasurable. And it is nice to leave your phone behind. I mean, maybe that's not safe in some
Mhm.
cases, but um, it's hard to get out of the noise without taking some carved out time to really do that. And
Mhm.
nature is the perfect playground to engage with when you're getting your dose of nature, right? I mean,
Right,
did that make
right.
sense?
It
Earth is
does.
the perfect playground, I should say.
It does, and I think these are choices because I mean, I agree with you. There's different ways of using technology, and there's different intentional ways of using technology. And so one of the places where my intuition and my downloads come to me is when I'm running. And but I have different kinds of runs. So I have the running in the open space when the weather permits and it's not all muddy from the rain. Then I have the regular neighborhood street running when that needs to happen. But in either of those, there is where I run with just myself or I run listening to a book or a podcast. And those are very different experiences and not one towards or more like one better than the other, but I try to choose what I'm looking for. And if I'm listening to something, I'm wanting to learn. I'm preparing for a podcast, or I'm preparing for something else, or this book is something that I really want to read related to coaching, for example. But I also know that when I won't get the same downloads and thoughts when I do that, right? So I feel like there's just again, I guess we're talking DIY, which is like do it your way and do it with some intention.
Yeah, I think, I would be a hypocrite if I didn't admit to listening to your podcast, which I really enjoy while I'm doing other things, right? And
Yeah.
it's normal and you can promise yourself I'll never send an email from the beach and then but oh, that one is after this one. This is really the one that's important right
Just
now,
this one. This is
right?
important.
It's
Yeah.
urgent. I mean, this is,
Yeah.
um the exception. So maybe just adding instead of taking away, adding, okay, but can I do my meditation outside? Maybe I do it with my eyes open, or can I just I'm going to leave my phone indoors and I'm going to step outside and I'm just going to be out there for 10 minutes without checking it. And I think I don't know about you, but for me, I think, I can be in nature, but it sometimes it's immediate, that connection and that nurturing and that kind of like recognition that is discussed in the Celestine prophecy, talking to the
Mhm.
leaves and whatnot. You're feeling that magic. But other times I have to get out of my head first.
Mm,
And so I mean, do you know what I'm talking about? Like you
I
might be
do.
staring at a beautiful ocean and watching the waves and you're still not really immersing. You're not able to get totally present. It's like your eyes see it, but your internal
Yes,
experience is still mixed up. So you have
very
to
much
kind of
so.
wait.
Very
Yeah.
much. And it's like, and the vacation analogy is like how many, when you get time away, how many days does it take to actually feel away, even if you're staring at this amazing beach and sunset? So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and we don't do that anymore because, you take your laptop with you usually. For better or worse,
Yeah.
you kind of have to make it an occasion.
Hmm.
Your time off screens, it's got to be a priority and something that you actually intentionally schedule and make part of your day if that's part of your DIY.
Hmm. You mentioned Gen Zers, and it made me think of who you dedicated this book to. It was very intentional to new adults, right? To new
Yeah.
adults, and um and I'm curious, what qualifies as a new adult for you? I mean, that's a really, I'm sure, an intentional pick. And is it a larger swath of people, a new adult, or is it a certain age range that you're thinking about?
You know, I think that people that are of I want to say our age, I don't know how old you are, but they get this immediately. And it is for us too. It's for all people. And the reason I dedicated it to new adults is because I think there's a lot out there to support parents when the nest is empty, to shift focus and find fulfillment when the kids are raised. But there isn't really a lot of support for that rite of passage when kids jump from the nest. And sometimes these little birdies land on the cement. And so, what can we do to help them? And I think for me, particularly, my hardest decade was the 20s. And I think our culture is so youth focused that we are not doing them any favors by painting this as the best years of your life because it's
Mm.
so anxiety provoking when
Right.
suddenly you have responsibilities and you have to know who you are. You have to know how to do taxes and DMV and registration and show up for your classes and create a new social life if you leave home. And, it's not only that, but of course, then we have all the new layers of technology and so forth. So
Hmm.
I wanted to give them something like tangible, something that I would have liked to have had even back in my day when I was in college to
Totally,
soothe the way.
totally. That what that made me think of is my wife and I met early in college, and we had college. We by and large had a very positive college experience. Of course, life happens, but like we had by and large. So when our oldest was getting towards that age, we were just talking it up, and these are among the best years among the best years of your life, and so she, I think, was a junior at the time when we started having this conversation, and she had several senior friends. And then she was a senior, and all her friends went away. And about a quarter into the year, she said, if college is the most, like, among the best years of your life, why are all of my friends moving back home? Because they
Oh,
didn't like it. And we started to see, it was the first time we started to see really through other eyes, and just in my work, working with a lot of teenagers and young adults that age, that yeah, there's some things that are the same, and there's a lot of things that are very different. And we had to be really, what we learned in this one, to be very careful about what we put on our kids from our own experience.
exactly, exactly. And it's so different now. Just, I have 2 kids of this age, I mean, in their 20s, and
Yes, same. Yes.
boy, the kind of pressure to get into school and the competition and expectations and the shifts in the job market, I think it's very stressful, and I don't think it's fair to hand them all of this without some tools, without some hope.
Hmm.
So, but But to your point, I think it isn't just for new adults. I think it's for new adults and really any people,
Yes.
any
Um,
age.
growing adults. I mean, we're always having an opportunity to be new at something. And
Yeah,
yeah, and as we wind down here, to your point, we've lived longer, and I think part of our journeys, come with lived experience, and and how wonderful if we can offer this information like you're doing to the younger generation to start on the path and the openness and the exploration and the experimenting maybe at an earlier age than we got there.
absolutely. And we probably had things to at least disagree with served up to us,
Right.
right? But these kids probably didn't even have maybe a tradition in the family that was expected that they follow. I mean, there's just a there's a void
Yes.
of
Yes.
conversation that I think that we can have lightheartedly and playfully.
What is your hope for your this latest piece of work?
I am hoping that it brings some relief to new adults and that uh, adults of any age embrace their spirituality as a viable tool to have a more meaningful, fulfilling life.
There it is. There it is.
Yeah.
Thanks, Faith. Thank you for what you're putting out into the world and for this conversation. I knew it would be meaningful and fun.
I'm
Um,
delighted to connect with you.
yes. Let everyone know where to get the book and where to find you and your work.
Oh, thank you. Well, you can go to DIYspirituality.com. You can go to Amazon or bookstores to get the book. And to find me, I'm on Instagram, Faith Freed, and I have a website. I have a few. Can you tell?
Yes.
Um, so faithfreed.com. And if you wanted to contact me, you can email me from there.
And we'll think of freedom when we
Yeah.
think of you.
Coming soon. Yes. Yes. We've launched a couple products on freed-ohm.com.
Nice. So go there
Mhm.
too, right? So we need to
Yes.
people go there too. Faith empowers us to listen to ourselves and do spirituality our own way. Here are 5 key takeaways from this conversation. Number 1, spirituality doesn't have to be prescribed, it can be personal. Your connection to meaning, purpose, and something greater is allowed to look like you. Number 2, your true self isn't something you build, it's something you uncover. It's already there beneath the noise, roles, and expectations. Number 3, faith is not a belief, it's a practice. It's something you return to again and again, especially when life feels uncertain. Number 4, you don't have to do it all alone. Life is a co creation. There's power in effort and surrender, in doing your part and letting something greater meet you there. And number 5, your spirituality can be your toolkit for navigating a challenging world. Not as a way to bypass struggle, but as a way to move through it with more meaning, connection, and resilience. We know there are so many ways to live, so many ways to grow, so many ways to find meaning, and there is more out there and more in us than we often know. This conversation has given us a lot to reflect on and to think about. What is it that we believe in? How do we want to expand ourselves? And how do we want to do so our own way? We are interested in what you think about this episode. So please feel free to leave us a comment at Dr. Dan Peters on Instagram or reply to any of our social posts. Please share this with anyone and everyone you think will benefit. Thank you for being a part of our amazing community and bringing your people to us. Your 5-star reviews make a difference. As always, we have this moment, this day, and this life. Let's make it a great one. This has been a Peters and Rossi production. Make It a Great One with Dr. Dan is produced by Laura Rossi. Our engineer is Phil Rossi. Theme music is Uplifting Folk by Awesome Music. Artwork by Kelly Dwyer. Follow us on social media at Dr. Dan Peters. For more information, visit drdanpeters.com.